Welcome to Collective SOULversations. I'm Jody Jones, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this amazing journey exploring spirituality, healing, and personal growth. With over 15 years of experience as a psychic medium and energy healer, I've made it my mission to help people connect with their true selves, and I can't wait to share this journey with you. In every episode, I chat with incredible guests who bring their own unique stories and insights to the table. We dive into different tools and practices that can help support you on your path of self discovery. So, whether you're just starting out or you've been in this journey for a while, Collective SOULversations is all about creating a friendly and welcoming space for us to explore the mysteries of the soul together. So, grab your favorite cup of tea, get comfy, and let's dive into this enlightening adventure together. Hey, everybody, welcome to Collective SOULversations. I am Jody Jones, your host, and I have a very interesting lady as our guest today. I've had the pleasure of meeting her, having readings from her,
Oh,
working with her. So this will be very exciting. I'm going to go through and give you guys some information about her. Give her the bio, and then we'll bring her on right away. So, our guest today is Suzane Northrop. And so, Suzane Northrop is an internationally acclaimed medium, grief and bereavement expert, TV and radio host, and author of 3 books to date. She has helped thousands worldwide heal from the loss of loved ones by bridging the gap between the world of the living and the spiritual world. Her top selling book, Everything Happens for a Reason, is published in 5 languages. And Suzane has also written a medium's cookbook, Recipes for the Soul, which is a step by step guide for connecting with loved ones who have passed over, and Second Chance Healing Messages from the Afterlife. For 3 years, Suzane was featured on the Emmy nominated program, The Afterlife with Suzane Northrop. She has lectured extensively throughout the US, Canada, Mexico, and the UK and the Netherlands. And in addition to Suzane's events and lectures, she is also on faculty at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies and the Afterlife Awareness Conference. Notably, Suzane was part of the HBO documentary Life After Life, a study of the survival of consciousness after death. As a result of the documentary, Dr. Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona published the Afterlife Experiments, which features Suzane as a key contributor to his profound discoveries of science and spirituality. Dr. Schwartz and Suzane both are on staff as presenters at the Canyon Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. Welcome, Suzane. Welcome, welcome.
you did that very well, Jody. I'm impressed. And they always have it wrong because I actually have 5 books. I mean, really 5, but it's a long story, so we'll settle for 3. So,
Well,
and I've met you, and I've read you, so that's even better, I guess.
yeah, I'm sure you probably maybe you don't remember, but because obviously I know how it works. You see so many people, you go to so many events, you do so many things. But I've actually had a couple times. We actually have a mutual friend, and years and years and years and years ago, this is like 10 years ago or more, I had a wellness center and we were hosting events, mediumship events. And so we had you there with another medium, a local medium named Chris Stiller. I don't know if you remember the event at all. In Shelburne, Ontario. We brought you all the way from the
Oh,
United
oh
States.
wow. Okay, that's really interesting. Okay, very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I actually really enjoyed my time in Canada, I must tell you. I was extremely well received. I probably you probably didn't even know this, but I ended up on somebody's horse ranch
Oh, did you?
right before I was getting ready to leave. Yes, because it's like for some reason, because I have a thing for animals, and I happen to totally love horses in particular.
Right.
And she was one of the mediums there. And
Oh.
she's a major horse
Oh, you're talking
person.
about Marianne Kennedy.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes. And so, she wanted me to come out and talk to her horses.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was really quite a lovely event. I will tell you this. I don't remember who I was working with, but one thing I do remember is that she was much younger than me. maybe it was maybe it was even Marianne,
Right.
and it was an intense like whole weekend event. So
Yeah.
that might be the one you're talking about. I mean, it was Friday night, all day Saturday, and half day
Right.
Sunday. And
Yeah.
I remember by Sunday, it was like Marianne said, like, God, this is a lot of work, and I'm saying like, yeah, I'd say so.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Seeing as I was used to those things,
Yeah.
when you've been doing this as long as I have, yeah, that's pretty par for course.
Right. Well, and you've done so much, right? Like I've had the opportunity to have you host an event. I've also seen you in New York City live with Thomas John, another medium.
Hmm. Hmm.
I didn't make it to Marianne's event, but I actually studied with Marianne the mediumship stuff, so I knew
Hmm.
about it, and
Right.
it. Of
Yeah.
course, we always love it when you come to Canada.
Yeah.
Because
Well, I'll come back again. Invite me.
beautiful. I absolutely will for sure. The cool thing about it is because I feel like once mediumship kind of gets into your blood, like years ago before I was doing any of the, spiritual work or any of this, I
Hmm.
was drawn to mediumship. And I was
Hmm.
thinking about this the other day as in prep for us talking because I was going to Google it and I didn't, but I don't know when Google came on, like when Google was like officially launched and we went to Google for everything because I
Hmm.
feel like this was prior to that because I had gone to go and see a local medium and had a reading and he was the real deal, just like you're the real deal. Sometimes, mediums are not the real deal. That that is a
There's
fact.
a lot of people in that profession that are not the real deals. Yes, this is
Exactly,
true.
for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, if you've had the opportunity to go to a really good medium like yourself and have a really good validating reading that has all of the purposes that it holds,
Hmm. Hmm.
I remember leaving that and thinking and having the conversation with my husband and saying, can you imagine this having the ability to talk to the spirit world and communicate with people that have passed? I was like, this must be like, such a rarity. Like, there must be, I've only heard of like two people in my entire life that could do this.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And it's funny now because, of course, now if you go, there's a million mediums that pop up
Yes.
everywhere, right? They're
Yes. Yes.
they're they're
Yes.
all over the place. But like I say, it's not everybody that has the full gift. Like not
Right.
everybody has it.
Right.
So I want you to take our listeners back in time a little bit because we want to connect with Suzane the person and I want to
Mm.
know, like lots of people say, I woke up being able to do this, or it happened to me with this. Like, take us back and kind of let us know how your gifts came, how this whole life became for you.
Well, the first thing that I would tell you is I think it comes to you. You don't go to it. It's I mean, that's the honest to God's truth of how I can tell you about it. Did I have this as a kid? Yes, I had this as a kid. I think like anything, when you have something as a child or younger in your life, you don't think a lot about it unless you've had either a bad experience or, I mean, you've been supported by something or somebody within your family, or you had a family member that was, whatever. I just don't think you wake up one day saying I'm going to talk to dead people. I mean, it
Right.
just, but I kind of did. And my very first vivid experiences was when I was 13 years old, which is a fun age to begin with, when my paternal grandmother crossed over. Now, she was like the big deal because, first of all, I was the first girl born, and there were boys on sort of on both sides. And it was my father's, of course, first child, which was like everything was about his first child. So um, I was pretty important.
Right.
And so when I was 13, I vaguely remember seeing her in the hospital. She was this big woman, larger in life, and on all levels. I mean, she was physically big, but she was also larger in life because she was an extremely successful woman in a day and area that women didn't do, what she did. She started a career from just nothing and, was extremely successful. Of course, wanted an artist in the family, and she wanted that to be me as well. So I was doing piano lessons at the age of 5 when she bought my piano lessons for me. So anyway, at 13, she got colon cancer. And when I saw her in the hospital, she didn't look obviously great. And like I said, your memory is when you're young is out of all, illusions anyway.
Right.
then not long after that, um, she visited me because she'd crossed over. And she came and she stood I say it's my Hollywood experience. She came and stood at the bottom of my bed and said, I can't visit you very often, but I will always kind of be there and keep up with your piano lessons. I'm going to give you my favorite house. And it was like sort of like this ongoing conversation. I think the thing for me, though, that was the most significant is that she was herself again. She was big and this big woman. I mean, like I said to you,
Right.
I can't tell you, the pounds wise, but she certainly was not, she just certainly was not felt. She certainly was no like, 125. I'd say she was probably, and she was, like I said, herself again. And one of the things, besides the obvious, that I think is so significant about this, I really truly believe if most of us had these experiences with somebody that we know that was ill and crossed over or had through some whatever tragedy in their life, we saw them, we would have a very different view on death.
Right.
There's just no way you couldn't have a different view on death.
Hmm.
So that was my experience. Now they say, what's the next stage? Well, how did your family deal with it? Well, I'll tell you how my family dealt with it. My father literally really went off the deep end because his mother was everything. And the day of the funeral, um, like I said, she was extremely well known and very popular in our town. It was a small town. And I went there and I saw this woman dressed in my grandmother's clothes in a box. Now, remember, I had just seen her, and I'm saying, like, why? I was trying to figure out why adults would do this. I was like,
Right.
why would they put this person dressed in my grandmother's clothes, kind of looking like my grandmother, but certainly not the person that I saw like 2 nights ago, and in a box, and of course everybody was, in wherever, I don't even know if it was a church or a parlor or whatever it was. And I must have been saying something out loud because at that moment, my mother says, "You need to go sit in the car."
Oh,
Okay.
no.
So I went and sat in my grandmother's car, that old Oldsmobile.
Mm.
I think it was a 61 or whatever year it was. Anyway, so I went and sat in the car. And then, of course, my parents came out and my father drove 100 miles an hour around one street town because he was, like I said, he was off of it. And I think what happened is that the thing that was the strongest was that she had looked better. I
Right.
think maybe if I hadn't seen that transition, I might have felt very differently and then see her in the difference. That was very strong in my mind. And so I knew she wasn't dead. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but she couldn't be visiting me the way she was visiting me, very clear and,
Right.
in that situation and actually be dead. We may not know where she is or because she made it clear she couldn't visit me all the time. But, it
Mhm.
was clear that we had that connection because,
Right.
I was pretty strong with her. I had we all have strange childhoods and some way level. But I
Right.
had two parents that were like in their own kind of world, and I was an only child until I was 9 years old. So I spent a lot of time alone.
Right.
And I had woods around me, and so I would ride through the horses, my horses through the woods, and sort of do all that. And so that was kind of my world. Of
Right.
course, it really did change, like I said, at the age of 13, when my grandmother died, at the age of 9, my one sister was born. So I sort of became the caretaker of her at a very young age. And so that's kind of like what my world was. I was never ever frightened. I was trying to figure things out, but I was trying to figure things out on my own because I just don't think this is something you can just, by the way, I saw grandma
Right.
last night, which I probably could have, but there was such a sense of my father off the deep end and the house being sort of, upside down. There was just sort of better not to say anything because when I said something in the car, when we were driving that way about grandma, and I
Hmm.
got the looks, I felt like I better like I
Right.
better sort of like him. So that was my very, very first experience. Although I must say I had experience with the spirit world years before then, where there was this guy, he was a Tibetan monk, and I was probably 5 or 6 or whatever years old. And he wasn't like anybody in my hometown, like he had the beard and the beard.
Right.
And he would visit me, occasionally.
Hmm.
Again, was not freaked out about it. So moving forward in life, I left home, moved to New York City, and the capital of shrinks and therapists,
Right.
and sort of all that. And I have to say I was pretty lucky because I had a lot of those friends that went into that profession. They knew I was different,
Right.
um, but they never considered me crazy. And now you're talking about time and past. You have to understand those words did not exist, Jody. Okay, there was no medium. Those words were
Right.
not exist. There were no
Right.
galleries. There was no.
Right. Yeah.
This did not exist.
Right. And
And
so was there any a point though for you, because you're, 13 years old is a tough time in itself, right?
yeah,
Especially
yeah,
for a female, hormones
yeah,
and coming of life.
yeah.
What coming into this, was there not any like struggle with yourself, like about like you must have
Mm,
felt different. You must have sensed that you were different, that you
yes,
perceived things differently.
yes,
But you say you had no fear in it. Was there any
none,
like, well,
none.
what's wrong with me? Or is there
No,
something? No.
no. I knew I was different. Um, and to me, there could have been a lot of reasons, you see, because it could have been my background, it could have been my crazy house, it could have been, I could go through a whole, I didn't
Yeah.
could have a normal childhood, whatever
Yeah.
may not be.
Right.
But like I said, I couldn't wait to get out of the house.
Right.
And like I said, when I would move to New York City, one of my closest friends was studying to be a shrink or a therapist, whatever.
Right.
And they knew I was different. Like it was very clear my friends or whoever was in my life knew I was different, but they never considered me crazy. And I knew I wasn't crazy. I just knew I was different. I didn't
Right.
know what that difference meant
Right.
until not long into my 19 or 20 years old, when you go out on dates and the dead grandparents or the grandmother shows up, then it's a kind of a different ballpark. So much so that the guy that I was living with at the time, and I was in New York for, I don't know, maybe about 2 years. I was actually there in the 70s. And the guy I was living with, because I worked at Sam Goody's, which is a very famous, by the way, music store in New York City. And I knew when people were stealing. And so
Hmm.
like I was telling the management, I kept saying like, this dude is like, this
Right.
dude is like stuffing the records. And they just would look at me and they'd say like, well, how do you know? And I said, well, I just know. And of course, they did catch a couple of them, but they sort of like poo-pooed why I knew what I knew.
Right.
And then one day I went home and Kevin says, I got to get you out of here because if I don't get you out of this town, they're going to lock you. I mean, they're just going to lock you up.
Right.
Throw away the key. You just can't be doing these things, Suzane. So I said, okay. So he just said, well, we'll take you to California where they're all that way.
Oh.
That is really what happened.
Wow.
I went to, I moved to San Francisco, which is, you have to tell you during those days where anything kind of goes.
Right.
I happened to, again, the person that I was staying with, her parents were shrinks. I mean, I just had them all around me. And then it was starting to get a little more intense. Um, and I knew that, again, things were different, but there became this differentiation issue, like when they showed up or when they weren't supposed to, that kind of
Right.
thing was sort of
Right.
like happening.
Right.
And so I did what any normal person would do, and I moved either northern farther of California, and I
Right.
lived out in the middle of nowhere land without electricity and water for about 4 years,
Oh,
3 years,
wow.
and
And this was,
figured
you were how old when you did this?
I was in my 20s.
Wow.
Yeah. And I figured out. And it was interesting because, there were a lot of communes in those days.
Right.
And people that were in communes, many of them had left the real world because they didn't want to deal with it at that time. There was a whole
Yeah.
lot going on during those years.
Yeah.
And a few of them were really smart. A few of them had dropped out of law school, but was going to go back, or a few of them had dropped out of medical school. And again, they knew me through this time. And it
Mhm.
was just sort of like, Suzanne just knows things. And it's just, because again, there weren't a lot of those words
Right.
at
Right.
that
Yeah.
time. And so then after a few years of that, I decided it was time to rejoin the world because my background was music. And that's what my passion was. And
Right.
that's what I thought I was going to grow up and do for a living.
Right.
Of course, people had other ideas than that.
Right.
So I knew it was time to join the world, and I moved to LA and went to school to get my degree in music.
Right.
When they say that Los Angeles is the city of angels, and I've been giving like everybody else, phenomenal love out there. It really is a city of angels.
Right.
And during that period, which again, a lot of people do not know, is like anybody that was doing what I did was living in Los Angeles.
Really? So I was
Yes,
going to ask you, did you at some point on your path like start to meet other psychic
yes.
mediums and then be like,
Yes,
oh,
yes. And so there was a place called the Masonic Temple, which there's a lot of those around, because as you well know from the past, the only way you could have any connection with the spirit world was either in, a church that had, mediums that would, that would rent them for spaces and stuff like
right.
that,
Yeah.
or, you
Like
create,
the spiritualist church,
the
as it's called.
spiritualist churches,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there was this one that was a Masonic temple, and the woman, interesting enough, that ran it was a survivor of the Holocaust.
Hmm.
Her family had died there, so she kind of took this on, and she started this spiritual church. And I knew I was kind of at home, so I would go there every Sunday, and they would have psychics.
Right.
Um, she wanted me to take me under her wing and do her thing, and I go, no, 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 just want to be a composer.
Right.
Not really
I don't want to
interested.
do this for a living. I'm
Yeah,
ready to
I
do music
don't,
for a
I'm not
living.
ready for the
Yeah.
shing things out.
Right.
But then there was a woman they had that she had, whoops, 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 wait a minute, where'd you go?
I'm
Hold
here.
on. I know, but I'm not seeing you.
Oh.
I move myself here. There you are. Thank you. It's the pad here. And so her name was Biddy Sitower. She's now crossed. She was a woman that worked with the Los Angeles Police Department, probably the first, or very close to the first psychic that worked with the police.
Right.
And I dug her like right away. And I
Right.
said, like, I'm not really interested in going down this path. However, I would love to study with this woman.
Right.
And she took me under her wing. And
Cool.
and it was interesting because I was in a class with all these lawyers, all these police people.
Right. Right.
And okay, here I am like this, really feeling like very young. But I sort of became her star because I could do this work. And it wasn't like, did I work at it? Well, kind of, but not really. It was just natural.
Right. Right.
And so because she was working with the police, because I had mediumship abilities, it was kind of a good combination because there were a
Right.
couple of cases that she worked on that I helped her, which I did not like, I must tell you, work on, but that entailed me to even farther develop my gift.
Right. Yeah.
And she was very determined that every week she'd invite people in and she'd make me stand up in front of the audience and give messages. And
Right.
I started that from like when I was really young.
Right. Right.
And she was a good Scorpio. And I remember one day that, I was given a message and I must have been a little off or something. And I'll never forget this, you'll relate to this being a good, if you know any good Scorpios in your life. She says, you better go back. You need to hit your source again because you don't know what the hell you're talking about. And do not ever stand in front of my room if you don't know what you're doing. Well, that scared the living daylights right out of me
Right.
right
Right.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I learned from old school
Right.
the honor of this work,
Right.
the ethics of this work,
Right.
the do's and the don'ts of this work.
Right.
And that, if you are chosen, because she said, you will do this. And I go, I will not do this.
Right. Right.
um, you must respect it. And so I came in from an old school thing. And it's interesting because when we talk about moving forward as to where we are now,
Mhm.
I really wish, and it's, I take, unfortunately, I take so much of this personally because I've just been
Right.
around for so long,
Right.
is that I just really wish that the people that were out there had some kind of schooling or something, or,
Right.
I mean, they put out a shingle and they want to make a lot of money. And
Right.
I mean, I worked for 3 years before I ever even charged anybody because
Right.
I was
Yeah.
just of that school.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that it takes away from, I guess it's like, if you're, listen, if you're a doctor and you want to be a doctor's, you got to go to medical school. If
Mhm. You
you're,
need to put in the time.
you got to
Yeah.
put in the time.
Right.
And it's not something you just automatically do professionally. I
Right.
don't care what your profession is. I don't care if you're a teacher, you're a lawyer,
Right.
you have to be reputable and you have these, you
Right.
don't have to do the semi work unless,
Right.
of course, somebody sues you or whatever.
Right.
So coming from that place, it was, it was it was kind of a crash course, because what did happen is that after I graduated school, um, they,
Right.
I had been living in California and I was really happy living there, but they said, "Oh no, you're moving back to New York." And I was like, "No, I really don't want to move back to New York. It's too cold." And that's why I moved
Right.
out here.
Like California. Yes.
Yes. And they go, "No, you will move back there." And well, as within a year, I ended up moving back to New York City.
Right.
Um, and this is the only thing I knew how to do. I mean,
Yeah. Well,
I
you're
had a,
chosen.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a degree in music, but I didn't want to teach.
Right.
And my specialty was composition, so that was very different, you know.
Right.
And so it's like, it's very hard to make a living. I don't have to tell you, as a composer of all levels.
Yeah.
And New York City is expensive, even in those days.
Right.
And I did a couple shows and here and there, whatever it was, and put out my shingle. And well, I don't have to tell you, when you do something like what I was doing in New York City when no one else is doing it,
Right.
you get well known like
The
really
word spreads
fast.
fast. Right.
Fast. I was on every
Right.
television show and every radio show and I mean, it
Right.
was just, I always tell the story how I have still boxes in my house of letters that were written to me like 30 years ago.
Right.
And I can't, I don't even know what to do with them still. I guess I'll probably be there till I die. I don't know. But so that was kind of like the nutshell of how I got to, and
Right.
so as a result of that, not only did I, get well known really fast, but I got to be in these very prestigious communities, like lawyers, anthropological society I talked at. There's, this is New York, and
Hmm.
if they, they want you to talk at these, very respectable, you just do it.
Right.
And it was really kind of interesting because, and then of course, I started working with some lawyers and police and I just got like this, like I said, this really wonderful reputation,
Yeah.
and did it for many years, and then got approached to write a book, and you know, that's kind of what happened to me. But I paid my dues. I literally worked for $3 on the street in New York City.
Right.
That's how I built up my practice. I
Right.
can tell you there's not one other person on the earth that's ever done that.
Right.
But I'll tell you, like, there's a fun story. You talk about fun stories. So I really didn't have a place to live for a while. I was kind of living here and there. And and it's interesting. I know you talk about this is you'll relate to this. I was doing some healing work also along the side. Not really crazy about it, but every once in a while people would ask me. And there was this one day I had this appointment to go to, and I was in such a hurry that I ran across the street, and it was like one way the wrong way, and I was going the wrong way, and I literally kind of got hit by a car a little,
Oh no.
but nothing bad. But I just got up and walked away. My
Wow.
legs are all banged up, but I had to go to work. I had, sessions and stuff. But
Right.
but it was in Brooklyn, and that was that weekend or a few weeks after that. Again, the only way you could do things like this were at a spiritual church or a psychic fair,
Right. Right.
of which, fairs are very big in New York City in the summer. I don't know if
Hmm.
they are where you are, but they have these
Yes.
big, street fairs.
Right.
So I roller skated to my street fair, and I put my sign out, and I didn't say mediums, I just said psychic messages.
Right.
And, of course, the usual people walk by and they sort of stare at me, and they see me with my sign and my roller skates and my in my chair. Now I must thinking about like that. What the heck? And so, if one would sit down, and they would sit down, I'd say, like, to be really honest, yes, I do psychic work, but my real specialty is
Mediumship. Yeah.
mediumship, yes. And so next thing you know, there'd be two people, and the next thing you know, there'd be three people.
Right. Right.
This one particular night, because most of the fairs closed by like 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
the police came around and they saw that there was this line of people. And do you know what they did?
What?
They blocked off the street for me
Oh
in my own
wow.
little section, and they
Wow.
made people drive around. They said, well, these people obviously want to see you.
Wow.
True story.
That's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes, it was beautiful.
That's
By the time I think I left there, which must have been something like at 10 o'clock at night, talk about exhaustion.
right.
I
Right.
mean, my $3 really came into whatever. I don't know what I made
Yeah.
then.
You're
I might
working
have
hard
made,
for the money.
yeah,
Yeah.
I might have made 50 or 60 bucks for that, for
Right.
that.
Yeah.
But so in any case, that was really sort of how I started my practice. And it was, I must say, it was extremely overwhelming because there
Yeah.
wasn't anybody else doing this.
Right. Right.
And you feel like you're responsible for all, and of course you can't be, because it's impossible.
Right.
And you can't possibly answer the letters, and you can't possibly see all these people. And one story is, I don't have to tell you, one story is more tragic than the other.
Right.
And that's sort of how my journey sort of started. And I became interested enough the seance queen. And I did traditional seances, which again, nobody does really those anymore.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Because you have to go into trance, because I'm a traditional trance medium.
Right.
And that requires a phenomenal amount of energy.
Yes.
So being in New York, where there's a lot of Italians and a lot of Jews, I must have traveled to New Jersey and Long Island and this. I mean, like there wasn't a place that I didn't travel to
Right. Right.
several years. And like I said, then I was doing a lot of media. And at the
Yeah.
time, I was living in a brownstone apartment, and there were a couple times I would walk out and there would be people there. So I knew it was getting a little sketchy there.
Well, it was pretty
That's
cool.
it.
Like I've seen you and you guys, and maybe I'll put some of the links. But if you look up, you can actually see some of the footage of Suzanne's show. Like she actually had a show, and there's also you
In
can
Canada.
right.
Yeah.
I think at some point I thought you were Canadian. That's because you had that show. And then also about the the experiment that you did. Do you want to tell us
Yes.
about because I found that watching that was so interesting.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you the experiment thing, which was really kind of interesting. All right. So I'm assuming that got to tell her name in a minute here. The well-known journalist who actually was the one that did the show. She did it to expose mediumships as fraud.
Right.
Just saying ahead of time. Okay. But in the process of that, the woman that was actually her she was really her director. And she was quite incredibly, and she was also very, very much into what I do. So it was really great because we sort of like had her. But then they needed, because they found Gary Swartz.
Right.
And they
And
said,
maybe
like,
tell our listeners who Gary Swartz is. So
Gary Swartz, Dr. Gary Swartz is probably, he's a scientist and well known in his field. I would have to say, in reality, he's had more mediums than probably anybody else in the country at his table.
right.
Many mediums flock to have him test them because
Right.
it's a great credential, because he's PhD and he's known this work longer than anybody else, because we're talking
Right.
40 years here.
Right.
And so Linda Ellaby it was her show that she was
Right.
doing on that special for HBO. So what happened is that when she got wind of this scientist dude doing these studies, and he was trying to do them underground because he was a tenured professor at the University of Arizona. And it's
Right.
sort of like, you're a little nervous about your reputation or what's
Right.
going to
Why are you
sort of,
doing this woo woo stuff? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what happened is that she said, okay, I want to do this special on HBO called Life After Life. We need to have quote unquote victims.
Right.
And because he didn't know, he said, first of all, he's a scientist, number one.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you've ever worked with scientists, but they come in with books like this, Jody. I am not kidding you. They come in with
Right.
books that are like, 150 pages of all intellectual stuff of how something's going to work.
Right.
And we all know life doesn't work that way.
Right.
So what happened is that she said, okay, let's contact to the top mediums. So I got contacted. George Anderson got contacted. John Edward got contacted. Um, and this other woman, she's no longer here. And one was a housewife that he was kind of working with. Anyway, so the whole premise is how you're going to prove survival of consciousness after death. Well, the
Hmm.
only way you can prove it is by actually doing something.
Right.
So actually, me and John, believe it or not, said to him, listen, if you're going to do this, Gary, you got to do it with the way that we work, which means we need to have a subject. And
Hmm.
you got to have a same subject, because you're talking about all the same psychics or mediums
Right.
working for the subject, so that you can do database, because we're all talking
Hmm.
about science, so everything is database.
Right.
So that's what happened. And so there's a woman who wrote a book. Uh, um, she coined the expression after death communication. And so she wrote this book, After Death Communication. So she got contacted because she said, well, you must have a lot of people because he wrote them in the book, that we could
Right.
use as quote unquote the victim.
Right.
Because yes, I know somebody in Arizona, her name was Patricia Price, and she'd be perfect. She lost a son and a lot of other people. Of course, we didn't know any of that stuff.
Right.
So if you're doing data testing, what you have to do is this. So we set up literally a science lab.
Right.
Gary sat at the computer. We had, curtains behind us, so we
Mhm.
couldn't see the subject matter.
Right.
We were only allowed yes and no questions. Like, if it's like, is this a yes or is that a no, and whatever it was. And then all
Right.
those questions, they go into a database.
Right.
They have no idea who you're seeing. You know nothing except for you just giving all this information.
Right. Yeah. Doing what you
Uh,
do. Yeah.
and do what you do, right? Of course,
Yeah.
they made me be the first one to go first, but that's another story. It's like, I have to do that. So
Right.
then I went, the data went in the machine. John went, the data went in the machine.
Right.
George went, the data
And
went.
were you nervous at all though? Because was there some point of you like you know you can do it, but that's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure, but I will tell you this: when I got approached by them, I said, like, listen, I don't need to have wires put to my head to prove I can do what I do. And I
Right.
said, I appreciate it, but I actually walked away from the project.
Oh, okay.
And so, but they wanted me because I was top on the list.
Right.
And so what they did is they asked Gary if he could talk me to be in
Right.
it.
Convince you.
Convince me.
Yeah.
So he called me up and I found out that he was from New York and we were both Geminis. Anyway, so
Right.
he said, and I thought, you know what? He's putting his tenure on the line.
Right.
If he's going to put his tenure on the line and, I am what I am, then I should do
Let's
it.
do this.
Let's
Yeah.
do this. Let's do
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
and I can tell you that there was quite a few other somewhat upcoming, well-known in television mediums
Mhm.
that were asked and would not do this. Just saying.
I don't doubt it. Yeah.
And so that's what happened.
Right.
Now, after we did the whole filming and everything, and we
Mhm.
sat down for our first meeting, it was quite wonderful. And he said, like, it's kind of really amazing the information we came up with, but I've got to put this through the data. And what we do is we figure out the accuracy. So
Right.
you figure out the accuracy of each medium, and then
Mhm.
you come down to a high percentage point.
Right. Right.
So Arizona is a basketball town, just in case you didn't know that. And so when I would go out to my audience and I'd say to people, okay, would you consider to be one of the best basketball players in the world? Well,
Right.
everybody would say Michael Jordan.
Right.
And I'd say, do you know what his percentages of baskets or hits are in a game? What do you think people said, Jody?
Like 80%, 90%?
No, actually, it's only 40 to
Oh,
50%,
right.
because he's one of a team.
Right.
So you have to do the accuracy of the whole team. So as a
Right.
team, they score probably in the 80, 90%.
Right. Right.
But remember, he's part of a
As an
team.
individual. Yeah.
Yes. So that's how they calculated our studies is one of a team.
Wow.
And so the percentages of the team, we scored in the between 80 to 90% hop.
Wow.
Yeah, I won't tell you who scored the highest because that would be bragging. However,
Right.
since then it was published, that
Wow.
I actually did sort of the highest among everybody. So that was actually pretty cool, and I was actually pretty pleased that I did that. Of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
after you do something like that, they want more.
Right.
So we went back and each time the studies got more difficult. Like,
Right.
we not only couldn't see them, but we couldn't hear them. And they would be behind us, and we would have to give information on these people behind us. So it could be old and young or whatever it was.
Right.
And then that stuff would go into the data machines.
Right.
So it was really kind of, it was interesting. And then after like the third time, both John and I said, like, we're done.
Yeah. Enough of the guinea pigs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're a little fried about this. And
Right.
so then he wrote the book, The Afterlife Experiments, from that.
Wow.
And of course, all that graphs and all this information is in the first book. I think he wrote a second one after that. And then he sort of got into the whole thing of like wanting to test everybody.
Right.
And so anybody that was reputable and wants to have that, star next to them, go sit in his
That's
chair.
yeah, where they have to go do that. Well,
Yeah. So
that's really
that's
cool.
that's kind of the story. But I found it does test you,
Right.
but you know as well as I know that, you either can do it or can't. I mean, this is not, you can't sit down and say like I can do this and
Right.
not be challenged. In the first place, one of the things by this time, I had done so much radio, and which, by the
Right.
way, is very different than TV. I don't have to tell you. TV
Right.
can make you look good when you're bad and look bad when you're good. I mean, that's true.
Right.
Because
Right.
it's all edited, except for the show that I did, was never edited because the Canadians had no money. So
Right. Nothing's changed.
exactly. So they had no money to edit what I did. So I had to
Right.
know what I did. So I had an
Right.
entire season non-edited. But on radio, there's also no editing. Now,
Right.
I know it might have changed somewhat, but it was like, you answer that phone, you don't know what the person looks like, you have no
Right.
idea what they're going to
Right.
say.
Yeah.
And it's radio, so you got to be very fast. You
Right.
can't you
Right.
can't be hemming up. Well, is this person like, oh yeah, I'll let you know.
No dead air allowed.
There is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
good. No pun intended, but it's really
Right.
true.
Yeah.
And they're not driving down the road and they got their ear to the thing, and that last they want to do is like, what the hell is this person doing? But
Right.
that was a great training school. And
Yeah.
because of my background in music, for me it was perfect because it was all sound, and I was used to having headphones on my,
Right.
in my head, and I was used to, tuning in my ears.
Right.
So that's why I use headphones, or I'm still, it's from my background. So
Right.
so to me that was like um a kind of a perfect match.
Right.
And again, I think, and I that's what I was saying to you before about that, when you really sit down and forced to do something,
Hmm.
that's hard. It's difficult. It it
Right.
it, it makes you really dig deep. And
Yes.
it also makes you really dig deep because I'm sure you've experienced it also. If you're looking at somebody and they're looking back at you, and they have this expression on their face like, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
It's going to throw you off if you
Right.
don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And it's also going to throw you off if you're going to say, because I'm sure you've had experiences many times like, no, 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 that's not true. No,
Right.
that's not what they're talking about.
Right.
Uh, and if you know something and you're getting information from spirit, you
Hmm.
stick with it.
Right.
Because you know what? Inevitably, 9 to 10 of those people are going to come back to go, I didn't know this until I went home and asked my mom, or I didn't know this
Yeah.
until,
Absolutely.
until I asked my spouse's family or whatever it
Right.
is.
Right.
Because we think we know a lot of things and we don't. And you also
Right.
know there's a lot of things that are hidden in families.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And it's also, when somebody comes to for a reading with you, after we do this for so long, we get so used to it, but it's a big deal for people. And when they come, they're nervous and they're emotional and they're
Yes,
like deers and with eyes in the headlights. And it's all, and it's interesting because spirits always, would say to me over the years, the proof is in the pudding, especially with mediumship. This is where I think people don't always know that psychics and mediums are two different things.
absolutely.
Some mediums are both. They can do both, but
Hmm.
mediumship is hard to do. It's that's why there's not a lot of great mediums out there.
Yeah,
And you can't make the stuff up. Like
correct.
you
Because it's got to
can't
be immediately validated.
exactly.
And the thing
Exactly.
is that if you're going to describe somebody and you're going like, no, no,
Right.
that's no, it wasn't like that at all. And then
Right.
what will happen is it'll throw you off if you're not solid.
Right. Drop your vibration and then yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
So
I think I learned a long time ago though, luckily, just from doing so many readings, that when I step out of the way, my ego gets out of the way, I realize I'm just the translator. I
yes,
really don't do any of the heavy lifting.
you are just the vehicle.
Yeah. And when it
Right.
comes through, when the information comes through, if I give it to somebody and they don't take it, then I go back in and say, listen, can you give it to me in another way? I don't ever doubt the information spirit. It's funny when
Mhm,
you say they, because you were like they. That's what I always say is they,
mhm.
and people are always like, who are you talking about? They? Who is they?
Yeah, they always wonder who it is. Well, that's why I was said to you when I had that little experience with Betty,
Yeah.
and she said you never put your ego in the way, because
Right.
that's when you have a rug pulling party, and once you
Right.
have a rug pulling party, you'll never forget it. And I used to
Okay.
always say this to my students, like, put it out in the back door. Could
Right.
you don't need it to get your
Right.
information. If
Right.
anything, it's going to hinder you. Because the
Absolutely.
minute you, if the, because this is not left brain based. I mean,
Right.
on some
Right.
level, but mostly it's not.
Yes.
And so you can't calculate when information is flowing through because, as you well know, and I'm assuming you understand, there is a level of trance, which means a cross
Oh,
that
absolutely.
does
Yes.
happen in
Yes.
that connection.
Yes.
So what you're doing basically is that you're opening yourself up. You're stepping out of the way and allowing that to come through. Being a
Mhm.
trance medium taught me that really well, because I
Right.
worked
Right.
with a woman, Elizabeth, whom I have no idea who she is. She's Scottish, but she works with me when I go into certain level of trances, which I don't as much as I used to, but
Right.
um, so I don't do as much seance work as I used to, although I did do the other night. It was actually pretty cool. But anyway, you bypass, and there's a something in the brain that we bypass, and that's
Right.
a logic center. And when you
Yes.
bypass your logic center, it's really true information that's coming through.
Right. Yeah. It can't be made up. You're
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
especially the validation that you get when you're giving stuff
Mhm.
that, you know,
Yeah.
you when the people say, "How did you know that?" You right? That's always
Well, that's what you're paying me for. I mean,
right, exactly.
this is
But it's
not,
true though, because and I'm sure you've seen this obviously with all of the, you know, the psychic. There's one thing that I didn't do in all the years of doing this now is I never went and did all the psychic fairs. I never went and did any of
mhm,
the big shows. And the reason for that is because I'm very much an empath and energetically sensitive. I call myself an empowered empath because
mhm.
you know the word empath has gotten a bad
Name, yes.
reputation.
Like everything else, but yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I it's too much energy. It's too much. There's always, you know, too many people in there that are psychics and mediums that are really not psychics and mediums. They're, you know, they're performers. And
Hmm.
that kind of energy is very distorting and, you know,
Right.
difficult to be around.
Hmm.
Do you consider yourself to be an empath? Like when we talk about, or do you have like a, I mean, we're vibrationally different. I don't care what anybody says. If you have been chosen, and I believe you've been, people get chosen to be a
Hmm.
medium
Hmm.
specifically,
Hmm.
we're different. Vibrationally, we're very different.
Yes, we are.
Right.
Yes.
And so would
Yes.
you consider yourself to be an empath? Like, is that, have you ever, has that been a
Um,
struggle for you? Because it's, you know, people think, oh, is, you know, it's amazing. Like you have all these gifts and you can talk to people that have passed and you can all this stuff, but it's a tough job.
it's a
Like,
tough job. Yes.
yeah,
It requires a phenomenal amount of energy.
yes.
And it's a tough job because it's like, I think I probably could explain it to you in a better way. You can be a sensitive or you can be an impact, right?
Hmm.
But you can't be that and do the work to the level of depth,
Right.
because what will happen is that you, I mean, there are people in, and you know, because I come from the school of you know, the Brits,
Right.
you know, and that program, where everything is going through you, and because everything is going through you leave it at the door.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Yes.
If you take it on, and not only are you going to get physically sick,
Right.
but you're not going to be able to work to the level that you need to.
Right.
So I know that's what you're talking about. You can be
Hmm.
very spiritual, you can be very psychic, you can be an impact, but you can't do that and work to the level that I work at, to be honest with you,
You're
as a
right.
medium.
Right.
Because if you do, you know, at some point you will get sick. You will just, you know,
Right.
you won't be able to work to that level. So
Yeah.
so my level is that, you know, I kind of have, for lack of a better word, I kind of have like the perfect combination that I can go to that place.
Hmm.
And there's no questions. I've had every tragedy you can imagine in my life in front of me,
Right.
and I can give them the information that they need,
Hmm.
and then I may think about it a little bit once they leave, or the next day afterwards, because like I said, I've had some intense stuff,
Right.
but I shut that door.
Right. Right.
Number one, at this point, it's not my business. You know,
Right.
I've
Yeah.
done my job,
Yeah.
and I know that if I do that, it's not going to be a good thing. Like traditionally, if you were to study again, a lot of the, you know, the British mediums, people, if you notice, a lot of them were very overweight,
Right.
and a lot of them were very overweight because what happens is you
And they also
cannot,
die very young as well.
and
Did
they
you know
die
that?
very young.
Yes.
Exactly, they die
Yes.
very young. Yes, yes.
Great
Yes,
profession that we've
they
been chosen
profession.
for,
You
right?
overweight and you don't live very long. That's
Right.
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 In saying that, again, you're responsible for your vehicle, period.
Right.
No one else is responsible for your vehicle. All of this stuff is all true, but
Right.
only you are responsible for your vehicle.
Right. And I feel like also though it's we didn't get a, get out of jail free card because we've been chosen to do mediumship work or psychic work. We're still souls that are here to do work.
Absolutely.
We're still every day in the trenches, learning, growing, healing,
Absolutely. That's right.
all of that.
We don't get it. You're right. We don't get the get out of jail card. We
No.
still have to live our life. We still are responsible.
Right.
But I will tell you this, with this ability, gift, whatever you want to call it, to me, I think your responsibility is high.
Right.
And I think anybody that's in any sense of power, whatever
Right.
that power may be,
Right.
you have much more responsibility than somebody else does. That's just my
Well, and also
feeling.
the pressure. I mean,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
have the moral responsibility because
Yes.
yes, people come to us at, at their worst times in their lives, and
Correct.
we have to be like when you talked at the beginning about, there should be a code of conduct for what we do because of course, if you say the wrong thing to somebody about their loved person,
It can be devastating to
right?
them.
I've heard
Yes.
horrific stories where, people would come, clients would come for readings and they would be like, oh, yeah, I went to this medium and they couldn't reach my brother who had just died. And they said that he must be in hell or must be in, like
Yes.
stuff like
Yes.
that is detrimental. Like
It
it's
is very detrimental. Yes.
horrific for
That's very
sure.
detrimental. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that you have that to deal with. But I feel like also, you know, we have, the obligation to be to ourselves, to be doing the work that we do because, and I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but for me at one point, and not too long ago, because like 2 years ago, I hit a crash. Like my human vessel just crashed on me. Right? Because I was this medium that could sit in a chair and do readings all day long. And, I would meditate because I need to raise my vibration. But I was not doing all of the work that I needed to do on myself. I was
Mhm.
busy, doing my job. And I
Right.
and I feel like that's what can happen when it's a it's a big pressure to do what we do to show up for people, but there's also that like sense of, well, I can't come out and tell people that I'm having a bad day. I can't come out and tell people that, oh, my guidance team is not giving me special instructions on how to fix my physical body right now. Do you know what
Right.
I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yes.
And people just assume that. They assume, well, because I can come to you for a reading and all of a sudden you've got all of this information that nobody would have, why don't you have this information for yourself? Why are you not using it to fix yourself?
That's a $64,000 question, Jody. Well, I think that we get extras because we have insights into, the connection world. So they think we get extra. We don't get extra. We're still
Right,
here doing our thing, responsibility and doing the best that we can in this world and
right.
whatever, I mean,
Yes,
that's, we still got to pay rent. We still got,
right.
we still have to do all of those things and be in two worlds. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if you get, from who I live with, like they said, you have no idea what it is to live with somebody who lives in two worlds. I mean, like,
right,
not a clue what it is to live with somebody in two worlds. We had this conversation yesterday and you don't remember it today. It's like,
right,
and the truth is, I feel bad, but there's not a heck of a lot I can do about it. I can only, try to be is like remembering as I can, but there's a thing that I've trained myself with
hmm,
of not memory because of when they
right,
walk out the door, I don't want to have that memory.
right,
So
right,
I have to assume some of that might spill into the other part of my life, of why I don't, or I don't know,
right.
unless it's
Yeah.
my age, or I don't know, whatever it is, but I do know that there is something, and I've talked to John about this, by the way, Edward, and he calls you mediumizer.
Right.
It's that's his words, because he has the same issues, and the other people like Thomas John, he has the same issues also.
Right. Yeah, for
And
sure.
they're both obviously in relationships. So these people can obviously, be our friends and understand it, because if you're, you're
Right.
in those shoes,
Right.
and that is part of it.
Yes.
And I don't know, I mean, I've been doing this for too long. I really don't know what else one can do except for try to be as present as you can be, which is not
Right.
always easy.
Right.
When you're not, being out of the body or whatever it is. Because
Right.
it's like a plug-in. It's like, the minute you go to do, it's like I plug it into the wall and that's it. It's
Right.
so it's, do you have to work to do this? Not really. And the truth is, I never really, I mean, if I was to say I worked hard, what I probably worked hard was at fine tuning my skills
Right.
and trusting it. It's like, when you're first starting your practice, it's like, are they gonna come when
Right.
they come into the door? But they always
Well, that's
did.
the thing when you're teaching. So when, it's been a while since I've taught, but when I would teach mediumship circles and psychic
Hmm.
development circles, and, I think one of the hardest things to teach your students is it's really an undoing of things. It's really, that's why when I would start my classes, I would start with like, we need to work on your spiritual foundation to begin with. Like you need to, first of all, you need to get to know your energy, what your vibrational energy feels like, so that when you are bringing in other energies, you can read them clearly and not impose yourself into them, right?
Mm,
Which
that's very
I've
smart.
I've been to a
Yeah.
million psychics mediums before, and some of the worst ones were, where they're telling you their life story.
Oh, God.
Right? And you're like, well, I wanted to hear about me, but it
Yeah.
sounds
Why
like
did I
you're
pay you for that? Yeah, I got it.
right.
I got it. Yes.
And it's
Yeah.
funny because back in the day, before I did any of this, I was a hairdresser. I went to hairdressing school, became a hairdresser. And one of my greatest teachers, she had said to me, when you have that client sitting in your chair, it is not about you anymore. You're
That's right.
not talking about them. You're not about yourself. You're not sharing your life. This is not a, and I took
Correct.
that to heart. And I feel like,
And
yeah,
and they taught you right because that's the deal.
yeah, for
You're
sure.
not doing her hair, she's doing your.
Right. And if you think about hairdressers, when as soon as somebody sits in that hairdresser's chair, you become like the psychiatrist, right? They're
You
just like
do.
they just want to talk and they want to be heard and they want to,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep.
And
You
it's the
got to be
same thing
part. Yep.
when somebody comes for a psychic reading or a mediumship reading, right? They want to be heard. They don't, they don't want all of
They're
our
not
I
paying you, they're not paying you to have you know about, you tell them your life, that's for sure.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And they're
Yeah.
also not paying us to get our personal opinions about things,
Correct.
which is so important, right? I feel like that. Have you heard the term hollow bone before? Is that something that you've heard?
No.
So it was interesting. It had come up a long time ago it was a medical mediumship course that I took years and years and years ago. Because you're given all these gifts, but then you're like, okay, well, like how do I like use these to help people? So yeah, I can do all this stuff, all this weird stuff, but like how do I make it a purpose for somebody to be able to help them? And the teacher in there was talking to us about the idea of being a hollow bone. And this comes from Native American traditions. And the
Hmm.
idea is that when you are a hollow bone, that is where spirit uses you to communicate through.
Hmm.
And because they need you to be hollow energetically so that they can,
So, right, so you can
right.
flow, right.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that there needs to be a certain vibrational frequency to our vessel. Otherwise, the flow of communication is not as good as it needs to be.
Hmm.
And that's where how you say, there's some mediums who can, connect with all frequencies. Like there's never ever a time where you're like, oh no, I can't reach that person. I feel like maybe if they're not able to, it's because their vessel isn't as hollow as it needs to
Hmm.
be, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense, yes, I've never heard that expression, but it makes a whole lot of sense. Yeah.
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 Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure you're asked, I'm always asked, like, does it ever not happen? And I go like, no.
Right. Right. Right.
If
Yeah.
it has, it's been far and few and whatever, I can't, but
Right. Right.
you sit down, I plug in and this person comes in.
Exactly.
This
It,
is kind of what it is.
yeah. And I
Um,
feel like I feel like there's a lot of mediums out there maybe that are not able to do that. And that's where, you
mhm.
know, there's a skill set that comes in.
Yeah.
There's the gift of being able to do this, but there is a skill set that comes in with it as
There's
well that
no
you
question
develop.
there's a skill set, but there's also this. Um, there are people who do this that really shouldn't be doing this. They do this
Right.
for the wrong reason. They do it for
Right.
money. They do it so they get attention because they need
For
attention
fame.
or fame,
Yeah. Yeah.
all of the above.
Right.
And They have no business. I'm sorry, you know. And
Right.
what happens is that they either burn out really fast if that doesn't happen to them, because that's,
Right.
if that's your motive. Listen, I always tell this joke. When I was doing so some of the places that, you know, that obviously that I work a lot of, like Boston and New York, and a lot on the
Hmm.
East Coast, and actually also the West Coast as well, is that, you know, you're really well known.
Right.
And so I was doing this event of, I don't know, probably 500 people in Boston. And when they would come into the doors, because I had these guys that would do my event for me, and they would say, like, "There's a limo out there. Is that Suzane's limo?"
Right.
And they would laugh. They go, like, "No, she comes in her Jeep." So it's like,
Right.
it's sort of like, once you have forgotten that this is a service profession, then you've lost it.
Right.
You've completely lost it, because
Right.
that's the bottom line. Hardcore. That's really what it is.
Yes.
This is a service profession.
Right.
Period.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
You may get well known, you may make a decent lot of money, you may
Right.
go on a television show. And if you do that, then I hope that you keep the ethics, which we all know that's not happening.
Right.
You know, what can I say to you? And this is a service. And once you lose that, then you've lost your whole reason of why you're doing this.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's,
I don't.
that's something I'm pretty strong about anyway.
Absolutely. And I agree 100%. I don't know how so there was a time where, are you familiar with the Long Island medium?
Very.
Right. And so
You don't want my
tell
opinion.
me, I do want to know your opinion because it's probably very similar to mine. So she came out like how long ago would you say? Maybe like 10 years ago, like big time
Somewhere in
popular?
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And for anybody that doesn't know, so Teresa Caputo is the name. She's from New York, I believe. And
Yes, she
so
is.
tell us what you think about her as a professional
I
medium.
can't talk about other professions or other professionals. The only thing that I can say is this: it's extremely dangerous to walk up to people on the streets and give them messages.
Mm.
Extremely.
Yes.
It's not only unethical to the work,
Yes.
but you can actually cause harm.
Right.
Now, being on a lot of television shows and being this far from having my own television show, and the reason I did not have my own, because I was picked up really by the big wig at Fox, believe it or not. I wouldn't do what they asked me to do.
Right. Right.
And you know, I couldn't do it. I just,
Right.
there's things that I won't do. And that was one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for
And,
you. That's
you
good
know,
for you.
so it was just, it would have been, I mean, like I said, I would have made more money than I did on my Canadian television show, but you
Right.
know, I could, you know, there were things that they did want me to do, and those are one of them.
Right.
And, you know, and I said, listen, if you set up an audience that comes in and they know that they're gonna sit down and they're gonna possibly get a message,
Right.
just like we did with my show, then
Yes.
I said, fine. But I
Right.
am not walking up to people on the streets.
Right.
I will not do that. And
Right.
I've even had a couple, you know, PR people that, you know, that they were assigned to me in doing, you know, different
Hmm.
things. And they wanted me to do the same thing. I will not do that.
Right. Right.
That, there's not enough tea in China. You know, you
Right.
may get a junk of money for that period of time, but
Right.
you got to live with it the rest of, you know.
Yeah, because they're, what they're showing you is the fluff of it. This is again,
Yes,
this is but they're not
yes,
showing you when you're having
a
people.
bad day.
Yeah. Well, and what about when you're doing the readings for people and it happens to be the father that has passed and he's coming through and he was an abuser to the child and the
That's
child is
correct.
sitting. Do you know what I mean? Like these are big, deep, dark things that come
So,
up in
absolutely,
readings.
yes. And I've had, and I'm sure you have too, people sit down and look like, I do not want to hear from this person. And I go,
Absolutely.
that's fine.
Yes. Yes.
I'm saying the truth of you is, I don't have any control of that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And I try to say to them that, listen, I don't have any control of this. I have no doubt this person did that. Whether they're going to talk about it or apologize, I can't
Right.
tell you, because
Right.
I can't go there. What
Right.
I can tell you is this: sometimes, and I know that this is difficult, deeply, deeply difficult, it's an
Hmm.
opportunity.
Right. Yes.
And you can open that door and close it or not open it at all.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
it's interesting because there was a woman who came to me for many years. She had This is a long time ago. And she had 2 or 3 kids. And she was abused by her father. And all of a sudden it came out. And she had like really a breakdown. And she
Mm-hmm.
had like 3, they were little kids. They weren't grown.
Right.
And her husband, like, was nicest guy you're gonna find,
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what to do. I mean, he didn't know what to do. He
Right.
was desperate. He'd taken her to, 40,000 drinks and this and that and everything else. And even sent her to me, because hoping
Mm-hmm.
maybe that whoever it was, the father, uncle, whatever it is.
Right.
And it was the same thing, like, I can't open up this door, and if this happens, you got to let me know, because I have to, like, be very clear about this person not coming through.
Right.
We
Yes.
went through whatever it is. 6 months, a year later, year and a half down the road, the person dies.
Right.
And the husband says, again, you really need to talk to Suzanne.
Right.
Um, so she did. She came back to me, and she was ready to hear it.
Right. Right.
I think she heard what she didn't expect,
Right. Right.
but what she did hear is that she was able to finally move on with her life after all these years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I did anything magical. I just passed on to her
Yeah.
whatever he was saying, which I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you to this day, I don't remember.
Right.
But it put a different light on it for her.
Right.
And there wasn't like any, huggy, cushy, whatever it is, I forgive you kind of stuff. But it put a different light on it for her,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
the point where she knew she had been so instrumentally affecting her family, and she had children.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so everybody was getting, the repercussions of this trauma in her life.
Right. Yeah. The ripple effect.
The ripple and it is a ripple effect.
Yeah. Yeah. For
And
sure.
I heard from her like a few years later, and she, really thanked me.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I did have to find it on my own, but thank you for opening up the door and giving me a little push.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what your job is.
Yeah. And that's purpose. Like that's great purpose in what
And
we do.
that is
Yeah.
your job, and that's your purpose.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But that's, I don't get that interesting enough too often about, I don't want to talk to this person.
Mm.
But they will sometimes say like, yeah, I'm not really interested in talking to them after they've come through.
Right. Yeah.
And of course you say like, that's, again, it's something I don't have any control of. They're here
Right.
for a
Right.
reason.
Right.
I'm just, again, the telephone wire. That may sound like, that's crude, but that's the truth is.
It is the truth.
I am the telephone wire.
Absolutely.
My responsibility is to give you the information as accuracy as I can,
Right.
lovingly as I can,
Right.
and hopefully helping you on your
Mm-hmm.
journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my responsibility is.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
responsibility for, I am responsible for what comes out of my mouth, and I have to be clear about, that
Mm-hmm.
I want you to know that this is how it's being said to me,
Right.
and you can take it for what it is.
Right.
I
Yeah.
did this sitting the other night. It was really interesting. It was a sitting, it was a seance I hadn't done in a long time. And the one woman was there. She says, you don't remember, but you saw me like 20 years ago or 25 years ago or something.
Right.
Her sister was a bad drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
And she one day walked out of the house and left her 2 babies there and went
Right.
off with some other guy, whatever. And, she calls her sister up and says, I left the kids there, you need to go take care of them, because I'm not coming back.
Right.
I'm just not coming coming back.
Right.
And she said she came to me for a session, and then her sister died. I don't know how many years later, whatever it was. She ended up raising her kids.
Right.
And she said, I brought the one daughter who she grew up to a session to see you. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
she was a teenager or whatever it was. And of course, her mom came through.
Right.
And her mom said, well, I would have done it the same way, even if I was to do it again,
Wow.
which really crushed her daughter.
Right. Right.
And she said, like, she never got over that. But she said it was the right thing for you to do, because She was having an illusion about her mom
Right.
because she was young when this happened.
Yes.
And she was angry that mom left her and she was raised in this other family where there were other children and everything.
Right.
And if she would have been honest with her and made it believe like, well, I'm really sorry and I shouldn't have done this, but I did, and
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't have been truthful.
Right.
And that is what she wanted to hear.
Right.
And the truth is that what she needed to know was there was reason that she heard this because that was the truth. And she
Right.
was supposed to build her life on that because we know we picked these people. So
Yeah.
by hearing which was not truthfully, she says, you were like very hardcore direct to her.
Right.
And she said it was hard for her,
Right.
but she really needed to hear that because
Mm-hmm.
her mother didn't want her. Her mother, you know,
Yeah.
but her what her mother was doing, her mother felt the best thing for her was to go live with her sister,
Right.
where
Yeah.
she'd have a full life.
Right. Yeah.
So what she was doing, she was in her best interest.
Right.
But in her head, she wanted it to be her mother. Well, we all
Right.
know life doesn't always work that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had no idea. This was like 20 years ago. She brought this up at the sitting the other night, and she just said, like, you told her. And I
Right.
said, well, if you want honesty, I'm really not the person to go to.
Exactly. Yeah. If you
But
sugarcoated it. Yeah.
yeah, but the point is, it was really what really was coming from the places that it was to say, like, do you understand I did the best thing for you by
Mm-hmm.
letting you be raised by my sister who was loving and caring, and you'd be around other children,
Right.
and you'd have this great life where you'd
Right.
have food on your table and a roof over your head.
Exactly.
I couldn't give you that.
Right.
I didn't want to give you that. I
Yeah.
didn't want to get out of that drug life.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I would have left you once, I would have left you again.
Yeah. Exactly.
So she was thinking in the best interest for her daughter, but
Right.
her daughter didn't take it that way
Right.
because she had it. She wanted it to be her mother.
Right.
It's like we say we want things in our life, but we decide which the way we want them.
Right. Yes.
Even though we're being given a gift, it's like being given the gift and deciding not to take it.
Right. Right.
She was being given a gift.
Right.
And I guarantee you, this woman, Lainey, she said, like, you have no idea the hell that she's supposed to be through. I said, oh, yes, I do.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Because,
Absolutely.
she made her work for every, ounce of whatever she was going to give in her life.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely.
and that's what we do when
That's that's what a good medium does.
that's what a good medium does.
And I've heard people say, because when we had you and we did that live event for us, I
Mhm.
had some people say, Suzanne's very harsh. She's very hard in the way and that was the thing that I loved so much about, and I to this day, the way you deliver, the information that spirit gives you, because you don't, and this is how, from one medium to another, I know you're the real deal, and what you're getting is not going through, Suzanne's filter. And then when it comes out, now it doesn't kind of sound like my dad. It doesn't, you know what I mean? So when you're giving it in the way spirit is giving it to be given. And that's how we are supposed to do our jobs.
Yes.
We are not. Years ago, I was taking some training from this supposed to be master medium guy, and I remember we were giving messages, and he said the same thing to me. He went, "Oh no, you can't deliver that message like that. That's too hard. The message is too hard." And I'm like, "But I'm not making this up. This is
Right.
if the spirit is giving this to me, the person
Yes.
needs to hear it in that way, in their
Yes.
language, so that
Yeah.
it serves a purpose for them."
That's part of the responsibility.
Right.
It's like you can't sugarcoat things because number one, they're not going to really think that person's really coming through. That information is not really real. But
Exactly.
your responsibility is to give the information the best way that you can. Yeah, you can try to give it is somewhat as nice and lovely as it can be, but
Yeah.
but we all know that
It is what it
it
is.
is what it is.
It has to sound, when, and this is
It's got to
also
sound authentic too.
absolutely, this is, as I say, so in all of the mediums that I've ever been to, you are the only medium, and Tom is John, but you were the only medium that was able to bring my father through. So my father passed when I was 2.5. I've been to numerous mediums, and nobody, I mean, lots of people would bring him through, but it was never my dad coming through. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it was the very first time that I had the reading with you where you were bringing my dad through. You were able to bring my dad through. And I feel like that's also a vibrational, in the spirit world, I feel like they can feel when we are going to genuinely be the translator for them.
Yes,
So they use us,
yes,
right? Opposed
yes,
to somebody that's going to just bring through a bunch of fluff. Oh, your daddy
right.
loves you. Oh, your daddy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
And
and
when you
it's not
sit there,
helpful. And
no, it's not.
also, that's very left brain.
Right.
You haven't learned how to do the bypass. You
Right.
must learn to do the bypass. And it's not a matter of thinking about it, because you don't want to
Yeah.
think about it, because thinking is left brain.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to bypass and let them come through. Now,
Exactly.
you're responsible always for what comes out of your mouth. That's
Yes.
very well and
Yes.
true.
Yes.
But there's
But
always
also,
a
the spirit world never comes through saying things that are not valid or
yes,
hurtful or,
yes,
they just don't. It's not,
no,
they have
it's
no need
not.
to do it yeah,
No,
right?
right. And they also know that they're there to work through you to give them information that they need.
Right.
And that's not fluff. And it's
Right.
like, sometimes people are jerks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And to validate them, to make them out something that they're not, is
Right.
invalidating also, not to spirit, but also to the person that you're giving it to.
Right.
Especially if their father died when they were 2.5 years old, they may not know them,
Right.
what
Right.
kind of person they were or whatever,
Yeah.
unless you're given information at 2.5, you knew exactly what that was.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you knew your father at 2.5 and the specific information that came through, then you had some connection.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm glad that did this ever happen to you? Because at some point in, doing this work, and I mean, I've shifted things up. Me getting sick 2 years ago was a big, I had my Kundalini awakening, my dark night of the soul. I had, had it all happening. And at that point in my career, I was switched lanes. So and I found, instead of doing just my mediumship, where I, regular clients that are coming to talk to their parents and their loved ones and all of that all of the time, they shifted it to me to the medical mediumship to
Mm,
start to being able to do that. But
right.
I found myself like, so the human aspect of me getting frustrated with people because people would come for readings, their loved ones would come through with absolutely no problem, but their loved ones wanted to like start helping them with their lives, as in, she's talking to me about this relationship problem that you're having or this health issue that you're and the people are there and they're like, no, I don't want to hear that. I just want to hear that my dad was wearing a red hat and saw me playing baseball on Sunday.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally, totally.
So I feel
And
like for us, it takes a lot of like, okay, I got to show up and do my job. But at some
mhm.
point, did you ever feel like this isn't fulfilling enough? Like I'm not doing what I feel like I should be doing? Did you ever reach that at any point? Because I mean, you've done thousands and thousands of readings.
I mean, it's probably more in the millions, but
Right, right.
yeah. No, no. Um, what I know is I'll know when somebody's pushing back.
Right,
You'll know when they don't want to hear it.
right, right.
And they're trying to, again, try to throw you off and, say like, well, it was sort of that way, but not, and I'm
Hmm.
saying, listen, this is what I'm getting.
Yeah, yeah.
And if it's not exactly right for that person, there's got to be somebody connected to that person, because that's how I'm hearing it on that side of the family.
Right, right,
And sometimes I'll say like, you know, this person's still here. Go ask them, because you may not know.
right.
And you may not know, because we know family have secrets.
Yes,
We just do.
right,
And they don't know them.
right,
And they may say something to somebody, and somebody may say like, either how do you know that, or that really wasn't what we thought it was, and
right, right. Yeah, yeah,
but if you get something strong, there's a message in that.
yeah. Absolutely.
There is a message in that,
Yeah.
and I agree that that is my job.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
is my job. To give the information the best way that I can,
And so
because
what do you feel like the biggest purpose of mediumship is? Like as in this is why we do it. What do you feel it is?
the, the biggest purpose is to connect with somebody that they love, that's no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
And you give them a sense that they may not be here in their body, but they're here.
Right.
And if you can somehow get past a certain amount of grief, you might hear them or feel them or
Right.
sense them if you want to,
Right.
but most people do.
Right.
Some people just want to know they're okay.
Yeah.
And I say, they're okay. Are you okay?
Right.
But I think that the service is of connecting with their loved ones.
Right.
And sometimes people, especially if there's a tragedy in that person's crossing, they want to make sure that they were okay through that.
Right.
Like, I always kind of make the joke. I go like, listen, if you were in the plane and it was going down, believe me, you'd beat the hell out of your body real quick. I mean,
Right.
you would just say
Right.
like, this is not happening. I'm out of here.
Right. Yes.
Which happens a lot with us, through
Yeah.
shock and trauma.
Yeah.
In trauma, you just naturally often will leave your body. I mean, it's just,
Right.
they've done studies that they know when people are in traumas that they have no memory because they've vacated the
Absolutely.
premises, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you have to.
Right.
So they're not there,
Yes.
but the connection of love is there.
Right.
And that's what I always try to emphasize is that, I know it's like they want to know if they like this person that they're going to marry. And they go like, well, what do you think I'd say if I was here?
Right.
And they say like, well, I'm not so sure. That I said, then you just got your answer.
Right.
Because it's not about them liking them. It's about you liking them because you're going to be living with them. They're not.
Exactly.
Whether they're here or they're not here.
Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
you want them to acknowledge your marriage. I'm saying like, you asked the wrong person because
Right. Right.
they live their lives. You have to live your life.
Exactly. That's I think the biggest misconception when people come to you for readings is they think that all of a sudden their loved ones have passed and now they're the
Become
Dalai
these
Lamas.
goody two, exactly. And they're
That's
not the
right.
goody twos. I say they didn't become goody twos, okay?
Exactly.
Goody two shoes. They are fine. They're doing their thing.
Right.
They're still learning. They're still working, whatever it is.
Exactly.
They're coming because they want you to know that they love you. They
Yeah.
care about you. That still exists. And that someday, don't rush it. You'll see them again, maybe, hopefully.
Right. Right.
And that's
Yeah.
the deal.
And do you feel like the life after life teaching about that this just doesn't end? What you
No,
see, like that's
you think it's done, and it's not done.
right. Yeah.
That's why
And that
you
gives
have
people hope, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Listen, when you've had somebody that's lost a child in front of you, they want to see that child again. There's their life, part of their life, their part of their self has
Right.
been gone for a long time. We know that.
Yes. Yes.
And those are, those in spouses for me are some of the hardest losses.
Yes. Yes.
Although
Absolutely.
I still have people that never got over the loss of their mother or their father.
Right.
So,
Yes. Yes.
and I learned a long time ago that to me, I thought like children were the it. But I
Right.
learned, you know what? They aren't. It's your loss is your loss. Everybody's loss is relative to them,
Exactly.
you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so people, you're still doing
I am still,
readings, right? You
yes,
still
I
people
am.
can go. I'm going to put your website, all your information, so people
Yep.
know how to connect with
I am
you.
still doing one-on-ones. I still do groups. I'm down here, actually, I was speaking in Florida. I've got some in-persons, which I'm trying to do it now and then. And then in March, I will be out in California.
Wonderful.
for
Everybody's
interview.
going to California. I need to go to California.
Well, I have to go out and, I've got friends out there and I love, I love California. California was really good to me.
Yeah.
And I like to go out there and just spread some of the, good cheer, whatever you want, and do some
Beautiful.
messages.
Yeah.
And I do have clients that haven't seen me in a few years, because of all different reasons, pandemic.
Right.
And all kind of other sort of like things. So
Yeah.
I do try to go touch my feet in the ocean, so to speak. But,
Beautiful. Beautiful.
but
Well, I'll
I
make
will
sure
come
that our
to
listeners
Canada
have
when it's
all of it.
warmer.
When it,
Jody.
yeah, I totally,
When
totally.
when you guys do another little thing that's, it's not in the winter, I'll think
Yeah,
of-
exactly. Exactly. Or better yet, I'll come to Florida and we'll do something in Florida, and that's
That would be fabulous. That would be fabulous.
That's beautiful. Well, it's been so much talking to you, and I
Thank
feel
you.
like we could talk on and go through more. And so definitely I want to have you come back and we'll share some, because you're also like a brilliant teacher. And I know there's so many people out there who have the calling and need guidance with it. So we
Mhm.
definitely need to talk more with you about all
Yes,
that.
that's great. That's
That's
great.
that's beautiful. And I will make sure that you guys know how to get in contact with Suzane. We'll have all of her information on there so you can definitely go and check her out and then watch for her coming back. We'll make sure that we have her back on the show with us. So
Okay.
thank you so much. And
You're
thanks
welcome,
everybody
Jody.
for listening.
Good. Take
Beautiful.
care.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Collective SOULversations podcast. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and we hope that you found our chat both inspiring and thought provoking. Your support means everything to us, and we're excited to keep this journey going with you. So make sure that you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to leave us a review and share your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback helps us grow and connect with more wonderful listeners like you. Until next time, stay curious and keep those soulversations flowing.